Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Change Process Improvements workshop. My name is Jenny, and I'll be facilitating today's event. Just before we get started, have a few set housekeeping. So we ask that you keep your cameras and your microphones off. This event will be recorded, so if you miss anything, you'll be able to revert back to the recording. We will be using Slido for this Q&A and for other things throughout this workshop. I think we have a link in the chat, and I will share the QR code with you in the next slide. There will be opportunities to ask questions. So if you have a question at any time, just type it into Slido. So this is the link, the QR code, and the link is in the chat. So we'll just wait for everyone to scan that. Okay, I think I'll move on. If you don't get the QR code, that's fine. The link is in the chat. These are our presenters today. There's a lot to get through. This is our agenda. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Joy.
Thank you. Thanks, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joy Namani, and I'm the Senior Analyst at Reco, and my role is to oversee the code manager across all of their sort of day-to-day functions. As many of you know, we've come to our second anniversary of Rec Go Live, Rec version 2 Go Live, which went live September 2021. And in that time, the Rec has been a new code which you industry have had to abide by and get to grips with, and also one which has grown very quickly in its infant years. And as we've been getting to understand the new processes and the new obligations on parties and ourselves, the code manager and Reco, we've been collecting your feedback along the way on many of our processes, many of our programs, and one such area is the change management area. So we've received feedback from lots of different angles. I may have met some of you before, some of you may be new to me, but I'm sure you've had other interactions with either the code manager or Reco, and many of you may have had interactions with the change process, and we've collected feedback which has suggested that there is quite a bit of scope and opportunity for improvements. So both Reco and the code manager have been listening to all of your feedback, and we're really grateful for all of you who have engaged, given time to help us understand how we can make it better, but also acknowledging and apologising for some of the frustrations that you might have experienced in the last 2 years of its operation. So today, what the code manager is going to present to you is the fruits of their work in collecting all of that feedback and trying to use it to develop and enhance the process that you've come to know. And this is also another opportunity for feedback. So today isn't sort of the cut-off line or the end of our engagement with you to understand how we can make the process better. If you do have questions, comments, and further reflections, you're very welcome to present those to us. But today is a day where the code manager will turn to you and show to you what it's been working on, hoping that you can validate and give feedback on how it proposes to work on some of the improvements that you have suggested. The Rec, being new, has tried to do some things in ways slightly different to other codes. So there are some principles which are the foundation of our change management process, which we hope to maintain and which we believe to be the right thing to do. For example, the Rec doesn't want to rely on industry to provide resource to drive changes through. But conversely, we have learned that the industry understands and recognises itself to be the holder of a lot of expertise and knowledge. And there have been instances where we haven't tapped into that enough. So you will hear the code manager explain how it wants to leverage your experience and your knowledge to improve the process and the outputs of the change management activity that we do. So I'd like to hand over to my code manager colleagues who will be able to give you a really full overview of its proposals, some of the testing and validation it's done so far to bring about the changes to the change process. And I hope that as you listen throughout today's workshop, If there's anything which strikes a chord with you, anything that you think is really helpful, but equally anything where you think there's still room for tweaking and improvement, that you'll feel bold enough and welcome to give us that feedback. So I'd just like to end by reiterating that although today is a bit of a show and tell, it's also another invitation for feedback. And with that, I'll hand over to Glenn and the Code Manager. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Joy. Just before we get started, I will let people take another look at the agenda. We have a lot to get through today. There will be questions at the end and there will be a break in between. And without further ado, I will hand over to Glenn.
You can come into the agenda there for a second, Jenny, if you like. I was just going to whiz through it very quickly, just to point out, really, yeah, as that fantastic intro from Joy. Thank you very much, Joy, for taking the time to do that for us today. As Jenny said, we would please put your questions into Slido throughout the day. We have got the very last session. We've given you plenty of time because we hope we're going to get lots of questions, lots of feedback today to answer those. What we have got, and we've allowed a lot of time for as well, is a demonstration of the new Change Hub proof of concept with Matt and Gemma, and for that we will probably take some questions as that's going on, because I think there's some real-time feedback on that. But generally, put all your questions in the chat, and we'll have a session at the end where we do everything. Thanks, Jenny. Do you want to move on to my slide? Okay. So as Joyce said earlier, we have been listening. The code has been live now for a couple of years, or it's been live since version 2 for a couple of years. We've had lots of feedback. We've listened to what you've been saying, not only through official research. So we've had surveys that have gone out. Our OAMs and the service desk are actively take note of what you do and feed it back in to our continuous improvement project. And we decided to take this opportunity to gather all this feedback together and look at the change process in its whole entirety. So we've not just looked at the way we work, we looked at the way that you can work with us and the way that you can interact with us more generally to make the whole process more efficient. If you want to move on to the next slide, Jenny. So this is a summary, and this is not everything, but this is the summary of some of the things that you've said to us. So the change process isn't too long. People are unsure what stages changes are at. It's not obvious to them. We duplicate a lot of our change material, and it makes it more complicated for people to understand what's going on, and but lots of people to read. It's not an agile process. It's fixed. Takes a long while for everything to go through the process. We need to be more agile. Stakeholder engagement is patchy, and you don't have enough opportunities to engage with us. And sometimes you feel frustrated and don't engage with us because the frustration is so much. So we're taking that on board with our stakeholders as well. The membership and role of the expert groups has diminished since it's come into places. We have the rig that's come in recently, and that's an improvement, and we're trying to use that as part of our process. And we'll talk a bit more about that later on during the presentations about how we've used the rig and how we'd like to use that sort of expert group going forward, or a group like it. Committees and change panels are inconsistent sometimes. Sometimes people will not don't feel in the position to vote successfully on a change, so we don't always have the information to their hands. And the code manager participation varies depending on who you see and what you're hearing. We don't always look as though we're doing things the same way every time. We've taken back a couple of technical solutions as well have had to be reworked because of things that were missed during the change process, and that changes do appear to go into a black hole. And as Joy said earlier, we acknowledge all this stuff is irrelevant. It's relevant to what's happening, and we want to make sure we improve it. We will apologise where things have gone wrong, but we hope to put these things back to normal. Okay, do you want to move on, Jenny? So what have we done with all the feedback we've had? So we formed ourselves into a task force group that looked at everything together. So that was, we ended up with 50 long list of statements. I've shown you a few on the last slide. Some things were duplicated across those groups, obviously, but when we brought it down, we had a long list of 50 statements that we needed to address. So that's a lot. So against we as part of our task force group, we looked at the whole process end to end and seeing where we could redesign it to make it slicker. And you'll see with Helen later on the fruits of some of that work. And we tested these solutions against within this working group, and it was made up of members across the whole of the code manager, so not just the people involved directly in change. We had from every aspect of the code manager feeding into that, and Joy and the guys from Reco were also involved in that as well. So this was our baseline, but it's not our final list. We're still taking in feedback all the time, and we want to hear stuff today and any other opportunities that you have to feed into us, what we're doing and what we're doing well and what we're doing not so well. We have also tested this with a small group of representative stakeholders. This is the first time we've come to a large group with some of the work that we're doing. So some of it has been put by some individuals just to get some initial feedback from our stakeholders. But please reach out to us if you want to be involved more, if you want to be part of that small group, or if you want, and let us know how you want us to interact. So as well as remapping the whole of the process, we've been testing some of that new ways of working, and we'll see that later in the agenda today, when Elise and Ryan go through some of the tests that we've seen, and you may have seen that going through the change process. And then we'll also round off with the proofs of concept of how we're going to use the new Change Hub. So hopefully that will be useful for you as well. So that was all I wanted to say. We'll keep on time today, so we'll move on. And I think I'm handing over to Helen initially, and the other guys that are going to take you through the review of the process outcomes.
Thanks, Glenn. A really useful summary of where we've got to so far. Jenny, if you can push on, I'm going to start talking about some of the process review improvements that we've put in place. But I just wanted to flash this first slide up to you. This is a slide that some of you will already be familiar with, and it is the change process operating model. And really what I wanted to do is just sort of outline how complicated this change process can be and how many different interactions there are in there, and to give you comfort that when we've looked at improvements to the process, we haven't just concentrated on that bottom right corner, which is sort of the output of a change process. So we've not just looked at the process steps where we get a change in and we get it all the way to the end and we get it to a vote. We have looked at the whole operating model. We've looked at the role of the code managers. We've also looked at the role of the 3 code managers, particularly within REC. So we've looked at the interactions between RTS, RPA and RPS. We've defined some roles between ourselves and some RACI responsibilities around there. We've looked at how we fit in with Reco and Reco's outputs. So how do we make sure that change that we're pushing through the process aligns to stuff on Reco's code map or the forward work plan? We've looked at the interactions that we have with service providers and with central systems. So how can we make that more efficient and more agile within the process? We've looked at the role of engagement. So we've looked at parties and we've looked at stakeholders. And we've also had a focus on those groups where views can be made, change panel, expert groups. And as Glenn mentioned earlier, we've in particular looked at the role of issues groups where you're able to come together and debate an issue together. So we've looked at it in the round, and we've not just focused on the very clear outputs of a change. So if we move forward, and just give you a quick sort of principles of how we looked at this project. So anything that we did, we needed to make sure met the objectives of the stakeholder. One of our key principles was engaging effectively with stakeholders. How do we make sure that you've got your voice in the process and it's being heard at the right time? We wanted to make sure that we'd got an efficient and agile process. So we wanted to remove duplication and stuff that just holds up the process. But we also wanted to make sure it was agile, that there was clear phases within the process, and that those processes and those phases have been tested and they're subject to continuous improvement as we're going forward. We've got clear steps for the change, want to make it transparent to parties of where things are. And not only have we got clear steps for the change, we're also defining the order in which those steps are carried out, including any dependencies that we might have with service providers, with central systems, etc. We've looked at responsibilities throughout the process. This is a piece of work that is still ongoing. So although we'll touch on it today, it's a piece that has still got a lot of work to do, and we'll be looking for your input through there. But we have looked in particular in our first phase at the responsibilities for each of the code managers within the process. Timescales, again, is something that is part of our remit here. We've looked generally. I don't have a lot to share with you on timescales today. I've got more to share with you on sort of the process and how we envisage the process to be. But timescales will be something that we're interested in your feedback, and we will be rolling back out and having these kind of engagement sessions with you. And we've also looked at the governance and the escalation framework within the process, just to make sure that we are still aligned. So they were the kind of principles that we were looking at. And if we move to the next slide, I think I'll give you sort of an idea of the current process that we have versus the proposed process that we're going to. And before we just go into this, this is absolutely not set in stone, right? These are our thinking so far. This is what we want to test with you. We're really interested in your feedback. And if we've got it wrong, or there's improvements that we can make to the improvements that we're suggesting, you know, this is the place today to tell us that. But we're also going to be coming out and get your views going forward. So the top line of this slide should be something that you're familiar with. This is the current process that we have out there. You can see there's a number of different steps. We start off and we have a change proposal that's raised, and then we go through a series of activities that happen that get us to the point of having a change proposal decision. So we get to the point of having a vote. And you can see that there's a number of different stages, and some of these feel quite duplicated as well. So there's a period of initial assessment. We then move into developing a solution. There's a second impact assessment. Then we go to a preliminary change. We go out to consultation. We come back with a final change report, and then it gets taken to a panel and a decision is made on the vote. And we looked at that and tried to work out what would be, what is important within it. And we recognised we can't rework and pull out. These stages are important, but what we wanted to do was pull together the things that really added value, and to make sure that we could contain them into different stages where that would really add value and that we could make the process slicker. What we're trying to get to is an end result where we've moved smoothly through the process. We're not rebaselining all the while, because we know that that is an issue that we have at the moment. We want to remove the inefficiencies that we've got. We want to make sure that we are engaging stakeholders. And the way that we've done it is by collating those existing steps into these 5 new ones. So I'm going to talk through these in detail in the following slide. So I don't intend to go into detail just at this point. But you can see that we're starting off in the process with raising an issue. We then move into a series of assessments led by the code manager. The definition stage, as we're calling it, pulls together 2 activities from the current process. So it pulls through the development of a solution, and it also has an impact assessment leg with it as well. And it's only when we have got that fully realised solution and we've got that full impact assessment that we move to the next stage and we actually transform that issue into a change. So it then becomes a change proposal. And we're pulling together 3 activities within here. So we're pulling together the change proposal being raised, we're pulling together the consultation, and we're pulling together the change report. And we think if we are front-ending the engagement within those first 3 stage gates, that we will be in the position in stage gate 4 to be able to pull that information all together. So we will raise the change report, the consultation, and raise the change all in stage gate 4. And then we will move to the vote. So that's our thinking on where we're going to go. So Jenny, if you just move forward. I'm just going to take you through each of these stages with a bit more detail so you can understand the thinking and what activities are part of that. Now, each of the slides that I'm going to go through, so we've got sort of 5 slides where we'll talk through these, follow the same format. The right-hand side, you can see that there is a simplified process mapping, and it is simplified. We've done a lot of work on this mapping, and we've got it to a great detail. But for today's purposes, we're just giving you the summary of it. And as we move forward and we explore this and we get more feedback on that, we will share those process maps with you so that you can see them in the great detail. But for today's purposes, we're just talking summary. On that bottom line, you can see that I've called out the difference between a simple change and a complex change. I just want to be clear with you. We are not going to categorise change by different types of change, right? A change is a change. What this bottom panel is trying to do is just to give you a view of some of the optionality that we might take in these steps. So how we would get something simple like a housekeeping change, how we would expect that to move through the process, as opposed to something that was complicated and maybe had technical impacts and system impacts. So just be mindful, we're not categorising change by type of change. I'm just trying to give you a view of how the process might differ dependent on the type of change that we're doing. So in the verification stage, the issue will be raised by the proposer. And later on in this session, we've got some demonstrations for you of how that issue could be raised. We've got a proof of concept of a new system, a change hub that will help with transparency and engagement within the change process. So I'm not going to go through all the details of how that's done. I'm going to leave that later on for Gemma and Matt to give you an update. So as is today, we'll get the proposer, we'll raise an issue. Slightly different, we're raising issues, we're not raising changes. We've also taken feedback on this. We know that issues and changes is something that happened in previous codes that you might have engaged with. MRA was something where there were MIFs, you had CPs. And one of the feedbacks was it was difficult to follow when an issue became a CP and to be able to link these two together. So we have got a principle in here that says when an issue is raised and it then at some point transforms into a change, we will retain that number. You might have a different indicator at the beginning, but that is one of our principles. So you'll be able to link the journey of an issue through to a change. Code manager's role in verification is to support the proposer. We'll be looking at the issue. We'll be validating it and checking that it meets the requirements to be a REC issue. So does it meet the REC objectives? Is it in scope of the REC? And we'll also consider other things. So is it part of another change and actually should fit in later on or with something else? Is it part of some work that we know we've got planned coming up in the future? So is it part of roadmap and we want to actually hold it at this point and do it later on? And we will then make a decision on whether we're going to accept or reject that issue. If we need to work it with the proposer, we'll go back and do that piece of work. And then once we get to an acceptance of an issue, we'll complete a prioritisation. As Glenn said earlier, we hear that concern that prioritisation sometimes means black hole, and that some changes that are low priority just go into this black hole, aren't assigned, don't seem to move on. Our intention in this process is that when prioritisation is completed, even if we are not going to start this work immediately because it's something that fits later on down the plan, we will be transparent about who has been assigned that. There will always be a lead analyst assigned to it. And we will also be transparent about the start date that this CP will get picked up. And we'll publish that to everybody through the new Change Hub, and you will have the option to respond with your interest on that, to tell us whether you want to be engaged with it, to tell us whether this is something that affects you, to tell us that actually this is nothing to do with you whatsoever, it doesn't affect you as a party, and you hold no interest in it whatsoever, which helps us be able to target who we need to speak to about changes. And just on that timeline at the bottom, you can see makes no difference. The nature of the change makes no difference to the steps that are completed here. We'll follow all the steps in the process regardless of what it is. So that's verification. And we'll move on to the second stage gate, which is assessment. So this is activity that's carried out by the code manager. And in our detailed mapping, you can see that there's a lot of interaction between not only the code manager, but all of the code managers within the process. And what we're doing then is we are assigning a lead analyst, and the lead analyst will always be from the change team. We will confirm a solution lead between the three code managers. So, for example, a change that had a lot of interaction and impact on technical services or central systems, it is likely that RTS would lead that, and they would be the solution lead. If, for example, we're talking about a performance assurance product, it's probably likely that RPA will be the solution leads for those. And shortly, I'll hand over to Michael from RTS and to Anton for RPA, and they'll talk you through their role and how they would take change through where they've been identified as the solution lead. So as part of the assessment process, the code manager will set out a change plan for this particular issue moving through the process. And that will include the stakeholders that need to be engaged. So we'll look at the type of affected parties. We'll look at whether it's got any technical or service provider impact. We'll look at whether there is likely to be a requirement to have some SME input, whether that's from the code manager or whether that's drawing on the SMEs that are made available to us via RECO. We'll look at whether there's any legal impacts as well. We'll also look at cross-code dependencies. Are we the lead code? Should we be the lead code? Do other codes need to be involved with it? And we'll look at the expert groups that need to be engaged. As Glenn mentioned earlier, we have brought in the RIG to help assist, because we hear that you miss those issues groups and there's benefit within using those groups. We've had some really, really good feedback from RIG and the people that have attended RIG, but we know that there is still some work to do around RIG and how that works. So we are looking currently at the terms of reference for RIG. We're aware also that RIG has some operational issues, and it also has change issues. So we're looking at that in the main and seeing, actually, do we need to split that out? Is there two groups that we need that are focused on different things? So that's a piece of work that's ongoing, and we'd love to have your feedback on the role of RIG currently, and any improvements that you feel would work with you. One of the things we've also looked at within the process is the governing body. At the moment, everything goes through change panel, but we have other experts. We have other expert groups that pick up stuff. So we have Green Deal expert group, we have the metering expert group, and actually, as part of the change plan, we want to be able to define, this change needs to go to RIG, and actually it's something, the governing body for this should be the metering expert panel, and they should be able, the metering expert group are the ones that actually should sign off and approve this change. We'll look at the change path, and when we talk about the change path, although we're going to move through each of the 5 steps that I've already identified earlier to you, there is some optionality. So this change path will pick out any of the optionalities that we've got within there. We'll look at timelines. So the change path will have a timeline for how we're going to get from A to B, or A to Z, end of process. And we will take that to the change panel. So the path will be ratified by the change panel. We will get them to accept that that is the right path, which gives stakeholders comfort that we're not just making it up as we go along. We've not decided this is optional for that, and the other. There is an option there's an obligation here to get that change path ratified. And then we will publish that change panel decision. You will see that path, and you will see the progress. And as we get later on in the session, when we look at the change hub, we'll get a view of how that looks to you. So you can see for different types of change, something very simple versus something very complicated. All of these, they'll all follow exactly the same steps in this process. There's nothing optionality and no optionality within assessment, but we might do things quicker dependent on the nature of the change. Our third stage gate, Jenny, is definition. This one's really misleading, I think, because it is the smallest of any of the mapping, but it actually is the key process for moving change, in my opinion. So this is where all the hard work gets done. It's the key area where we're going to do all the engagement. It's where the solution will get defined. We will hand off to a solution lead if there is a solution lead in place here, and we will make sure the role of the code manager here is really to manage all of those parties that are needed to bring together a full assessment and a solution for this issue. So the code manager is managing those, collating it and bringing it together and giving us a fully realised solution, and we're expecting that to cover all the things that currently happen. So we want to understand the technical, we want to understand the benefits, costs, impacts, etc. And again, everything will go through this particular stage, but it might be shortened timescales. Something like housekeeping, we're very unlikely to go through to hand off to a solution lead, to have a technical impact, all those kind of things. So sometimes this will be the change path that you say that we've got a shorter timescale for something simple as opposed to something complicated. And I think at this point I'm handing over to Michael, and I'm going to let Michael talk through the solution lead role where RTS are involved, and then Michael's going to hand over to Anton, and we're going to get a view from the RPA. So I will be back with you shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Great. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to take you through what we would be doing during the definitions phase for a technical change. So as you can see here, technical changes, particularly those that impact multiple parties and systems, can be extremely complex. One of the main issues with the technical changes that we encountered in the earlier phases of the REC was that several of the key activities, notably the technical design, occurred post-approval. This introduced a significant amount of delivery risk at the time that the change was approved, due to some of those unknowns that you can only sort of flush out through completing some of the technical design. So that brings us on to the main principle here of the technical change review, which is it's right first time. In practice, what this means is that we put a lot of emphasis in bringing activities to the left within the change process, such as completing the technical design where required, with the ultimate aim of increasing delivery certainty, increasing the overall pace of delivery, and also sort of increasing this sort of the quality of cost benefits analysis, and also integrated delivery plans where it impacts multiple systems. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we have here is a simplified diagram to kind of walk you through some of those steps involved with a technical change. At the heart of this process is the technical change workshop. This is a group of technical experts from across the REC ecosystem, primarily comprised of representatives from switching data service providers, so those from people who represent the ERDS services, GRDA, JES, ES, CSS, and others. So the main scope of this group is to progress changes in a really iterative way. We meet weekly so that we can keep the conversations moving, and really dive into what those challenges are, how the operational processes will work, really challenging requirements and the solutions proposed, so that we can get the best quality outcome for the changes. So how does it start? This starts, unsurprisingly, with requirements drafting, and then we basically move into rounds of impact assessment, right? The number of impact assessments are based on the complexity of the change. So what we have here is fairly mapped out on the slide here is more representative of a complicated change, where we would start off with particularly like the main impacted party here, and we would understand what that solution is going to look like through preliminary impact assessment, solution refinement, and also we may even trigger some party impact assessments at this phase to understand if the change is even viable. Once all of that's completed and we have a bit of a higher certainty, we'll move into that detailed impact assessment and design. And this is a really key part here, particularly for those those changes that impact multiple parties, where we're very keen that where suppliers or others may need to complete a final impact assessment as part of a change, they're doing so using a design document. This really reduces the delivery risk. It again increases the quality of the cost benefits analysis, and also just provides people with exactly what they need to complete a high quality impact assessment, so we can know exactly what it is that needs to happen to deliver that change, whether it's the right thing to do, and we can move it through the process. We would also we wouldn't look to do that for every single change. If it's a simpler change, we may only need one impact assessment. So again, we're looking to sort of pull steps out where we don't need them, but then also add them in to make sure that we provide a really robust review of changes and get that implementation plan that leads to a high quality delivery. At the end of this process, we would be producing the change reports, and then that goes off to approval with the full business case there. I think that's it from me. I'll be handing over to Anton to take us through the performance assurance piece.
Hello all. So some changes are of a different nature and more appropriately dealt by the performance assurance team. In essence, it's still the same thought process that you've heard from the other teams. However, in some cases, the performance assurance team may be better placed to lead on some of that development, some of the specific market engagement. So a really good example of this is over time, there might be reductions or changes to the performance assurance report catalogue. Now, it makes sense that the performance assurance team pick up and lead that change, understand the impacts. It's a more efficient way through the process. However, all the way through that would be integrated with kind of support from some of the other teams where that's relevant, either technical or in particular the main change team with their expert knowledge of this process. But in essence, we follow the same approach, but it would be led by definition by our team, and that team would also lead on, where relevant, the right types of consultation, impact assessments and engagement. One other typical variation, although it's not hard-coded, is in some cases, instead of the change panel being the right governance body, the performance assurance board might be better placed to make appropriate decisions. However, again, I would probably reiterate, this is following the same principles and logic, just with some slightly different steps based on the specific nature of that team. Once this is finally developed and appropriate consultation has taken place, depending on the nature of the change, there would be a hand back to the core change team, who would then bundle it up with other changes, complete the CP and do things like progress to release. I think the key message from me is that this is a variation of the same process with the same thought process, same underlying principles, and the same input from the same senior change people. But in the case where it makes sense for a performance assurance team to do more because it's in their kind of bailiwick, that is the difference. And that essentially is all that I wanted to provide on our role in the change process. I wanted to hand over, I think, to Helen, who had a little bit more to continue with.
Anton. Okay, thanks for that. That was useful. We'll now move on. So we've moved out of our third stage gate, which moves us on to the fourth one, which is the change proposal and the consultation. So at this point, we've moved through solution. We've got enough now to be able to actually raise a formal change proposal. And as I said before, this will be linked, so you won't lose the work that's been done because you can't match it to an issue number. We will make sure that that is linked. So we'll have a formal change proposal and a change report is now raised. This removes the requirement for the PCR. That was the one step that we have taken out of that when I showed you that very original slide. With the current process that you have, you may have noticed PCR is the one step that is removed from the process here. And we think because we've put in all the effort up front, we see no requirement to have a PCR here. There's an optional stage in here about having approval before publication. This will be something that we will have agreed in the assessment stage. So when we've actually taken and had our change path ratified by the change panel in the assessment stage, we'll have said at that point whether we think we need approval beforehand. And it's very likely that something like a simple change, a housekeeping change, we wouldn't be asking for approval from a change panel before we published it. But something that's been through a very technical change, has been, the very detailed, it's more than likely, that we would take that. So we would take that to the change panel and we would get a view on it before we published it. Actually, I should correct myself here because it may not necessarily always be the change panel. We actually might get approval from the expert group that we defined that was responsible for this change. So in the case of something with Green Deal, you know, it'd be the Green Deal expert group or the metering expert group. But that responsible committee, again, will have been defined as part of the assessment stage. So we then have got a change proposal raised, we've got a change report, and we've got a consultation. They then get published, get notified out to parties, and parties then have and stakeholders are then able to respond back to that. And I think our sort of key message around here is that at the consultation stage, we're not asking for debate on the solution or what's been agreed or the issue. What we're actually asking for, that the debate stage, we really want to push that the debate stage is in definition. At the time that we're actually publishing the consultation, really the point of the consultation is that you are agreeing with the code manager's recommendation, because we'll have put the effort in prior. And that we're expecting pretty much, you know, that the code manager recommendation is accepted at this stage because everybody has engaged with the process prior. So that's really where we're getting to with that. You can see, I have sort of talked through this already, but you can see with a simple change, we would say that we probably wouldn't go to an expert group and get anything prior to publishing a change report. We might have a shortened time frame for consultation, as we do currently with housekeeping changes. The code manager may well just take the role of the proposer rather than going backwards and forwards with the proposer to check that the proposer was happy. And you can see with the complex change, you know, those added steps that we would have in there. So that takes you up to the point of having a consultation out there. We will look at, as we do today, we'll look at your responses to a consultation, and then we will give our feedback to them, and we'll give notification of final recommendation, which leads us into stage gate 5, which is vote. So if we can just move on, Jenny. Brilliant. Simple one to talk through. Nothing's changed from what you would currently understand to be. There's a change panel vote. The vote gets published, and then we move into, we'll notify of what that decision is, and we'll then provide the next steps as we move through the final 2 stages, which we're not discussing today, but there are no changes to them. So there will be an appeal stage, and then there is a release stage. And some optionality within here for a simple change housekeeping. You know, we may well decide that that doesn't have to go to a full change panel. Actually, that's something that we can do ex committee rather than taking it to one of the scheduled change panels. So you can see sort of a bit of optionality there as well. And I think this is the final slide, the next slide, Jenny, from me, and it is just a sort of a summary, just to bring it all together. So there are 5 key stage gates that we've talked through. So that is like the verification, assessment, definition, the raising of the change, and the consultation, and then the final stage, which is voting. Every single issue change will go through all of those 5 stage gates, but we'll have some optionality within the gates, and we can add or remove those as required, and they will be ratified by the change panel as part of the assessment process. We will clearly communicate to you what the change panel, what the change path is for each particular issue as it moves through, and we want to be more transparent about that so that you can see things are not just going off into black holes anymore. You'll be able to see the progress of stuff in there. We're looking for a behavioural shift. We're looking to preload all of the debate and engagement into the definition stage so that we don't get into the cycle of reworking and readjusting and baselining, rebaselining as we are doing currently. We're looking at reducing the burden. And not only are we looking at reducing the burden to parties, we're looking at reducing the burden internally and across our service providers, other codes, etc. So we're looking at the use of SMEs, where we can provide SMEs into the process. We think bringing in these focused expert groups and having them in the definition stage also helps. It gives you comfort that, I mean, we hear from parties that there are a lot of change and that they can't always engage with all of the changes that are happening at the time. And what we want to do here is give comfort that we've got the right people in the room at the right stage to be able to give a fully realised view. So the use of expert groups goes there, the use of bringing in the SMEs gives you that kind of comfort that we do understand what we're talking about and that we will develop the right solutions. We want to give you transparency in output, so you know what's going on at any particular stage, and not just at the end of a stage gate. Within that gate, we want you to be able to see what's happening at any particular time. We also want to reduce the burden that we give to you with documentation. We're not discussing documentation in any detail today, but it is within the change process improvements work group, and we will be looking at how we can make that more streamlined. Part of that will be covered by the Change Hub and how that works. And we're also looking at internal workflow between ourselves, so between code managers, to make sure that we do have that clear line. Nothing's going to fall down in a gap. When it's handed off to somebody else for an assessment, we'll know where it is. So they're all important features of it. And that final line there, I've already talked about this, but there are 2 additional stages, appeal and release, and currently we're not suggesting any changes to those. So I think that brings me to the end. Sorry, I went slightly over, but there was a lot of information there. And I know we've had some questions through, so please feel free. Anything you want to pick up on it, we've got time at the end to come back to those. And I think I'm going to let you all have a break now.
If we go into the first slide, please. Thank you. So Task Force Sandbox, a bit of a strange name, but it was used for 2 purposes. So the first one is to blitz a portfolio of CPs, and to also use that portfolio of CPs as a bit of a test for new ways of working. So the task force, we set it up in August, and we took all the rec changes within the main portfolio, which didn't yet have a change analyst assigned to them. So as they didn't yet have a change analyst assigned, that was probably likely because they were classed as a low priority. So the task force portfolio is, I guess the majority is the low priority changes, but that's not to say they all are low priority. So a total of 52 CPs were moved into this portfolio, again, with that intention to do a big blitz, get them all moving. So there's a small team of us working to do that. Now, 52 CPs is no easy feat, so any efficiencies or more innovative ways of working, as well as starting to test any of the improvements we've been talking about today, was really important. So where we've got to so far, so we've planned the direction of all 52 CPs. So we didn't just start picking them off one by one. So we took a look at the portfolio, we put them into buckets. We thought about ones which could be bundled together, which could be treated, which would go into a data access bucket. So we all looked at the same time, and any that could be sort of linked together. So we've had our first bundled CP approved. So that was 3 changes in one. So these were, well, this was R0138. So very much changes, well, simple changes to legal text. And so essentially we saw it as a really quick win. Let's get those 3, get them moving through the process. So that was just approved, which is great. We've also had some change proposal plan milestones set. So we're starting to move down the S-step review change proposals now. And we're in the process of publishing more initial assessment reports and change proposal plans. So that's where we start to set our milestones and where industry can then see where everything's headed. So at the moment, we're drip feeding them in and stagging them into the process. So for example, on Friday, we are taking another 3 change plans to be published. So then the change panel can then approve those new milestones. So that momentum is building. So you'll start to see a lot more change coming through. An example, so 2 of the changes we plan to kickstart this week, we're saying that there's something called a linked CP. So they're not being bundled together as 138 was, because they have their very own and distinct cost benefit analysis. So they need to be treated separately. but they're similar enough in nature that we can write similar things in change reports, engage with industry at the same times, same service provider, and essentially ask very similar things in consultation questions. So it may not save a lot of time by doing that because we're still, treating them as distinct, but any efficiency is a good efficiency and a win as far as we're concerned with 52 CPs. So one of the big task force principles is utilising expert groups. So we've been utilising RIG a lot more. Obviously, with 52 CPs, we can't take it all to RIG, but we're trying to get the right things to RIG to get them in front of industry at the right time and in those initial stages. So of the 52 CPs, about a fifth of them were CPs relating to data access. So this is because data access requests aren't well reflected in the prioritisation matrix where all changes in the change portfolio come into. And that means they're almost always determined to be a low priority change. So again, don't get moved in the timescales that we'd like them to get moved into. So this brings me on to RO118. So Jenny, if we move on to the next slide, please. So this is a review of Schedule 12 and process to manage data access requests. So this CP was raised with two purposes. So one was to future-proof the industry for more innovative solutions that benefit consumers. And to ensure that happens, we need to limit unreasonable blockers to data access. And that also supports REPCO and Ofgem's intention to move to open data down the line. So that will allow a subset of data items to be open. And then secondly, to ensure there's a streamlined process for data access, so one that has the right emphasis on the appropriate controls for data access, so ensuring that the allowed data items are then reflected within the REC. So there's that industry view, accountability of who has access to what. So we've found that treating data access requests the same as all other change proposals just doesn't work. Not all data access requests are the same and need that same level of industry engagement. So the new process under RO118 will ensure these requests are no longer prioritised in the same way. So I'll give a bit of a whistle-stop tour of how the new process will work, highlighting that RO118 is not yet approved, so that's not due for another 2 weeks, but hoping that the changes that are currently in this task force portfolio for data access can then move through this more streamlined route, which is a far more agile process. So whistle-stop tour of how that will work. So hopefully you can see where we're putting the emphasis in the right places and how it will be treated differently to a normal change. So as a data access request comes in, it will be then scrutinised by the code manager. Code manager then works with the requester of the data items and the service provider to understand the use case of each of the data items, ensure they're appropriate. So we're not giving data items that are not required for that use case. Whether there are expected costs associated with the data access requests, whether those are passed on or not to the requester, a service provider impact assessment will be conducted. And then the code manager will form a recommendation to be taken to the Performance Assurance Board for sort of approval or a rubber stamp at that stage. Once HAB is happy that we've made the right recommendation, a Category 3 change proposal will then be raised. So this is because RO118 changes the category of the data access matrix, and a Category 3 change can go down a different route to release. So it's a far more streamlined and agile process. The newly raised Cat 3 CP will then be communicated to stakeholders. So where appropriate, we may trigger a formal consultation at that point. And once the code manager is confident there's been no risks highlighted with that data access requests, the Cat CP will then be refused, Cat 3 CP will then be approved and will go straight into release. So that release date might be dependent on when technically that person can have access to the data, or it can be split. So it goes into the code and first, and then they'll get their access. But the main thing to highlight is that it won't be a typical release as we set release dates in advance. So it won't need to align with any of the standard release dates or any of the pre-planned if we're doing extraordinary ones. So it's far more agile to ensure that when access is sort of granted or when it's approved, that then it can go straight in and get that reflected in the REC documentation as well. So it's still agile. So some of these processes I've spoken about earlier, they'll be completed concurrently. Sometimes before we even start the process, we may start engaging with industry because it might be a bit of an out-of-the-box request. So we might take it to RIG or consult in a different way, like an RFI in the first instance. So again, it should be a far, far quicker process, making sure that the right emphasis is in the right places, rather than taking it down the change process and preliminary change reports and following all the steps. Focus can go in the right spots. So with R0118, if it is improved, it will be implemented on the 6th of December. So then access requests from that point can go down that route. So I think that's all I wanted to say on R0118. So I will then pass over to Ryan, who will then talk about some of the other case studies we've been working on recently.
Thanks, Elise. Okay, so I wanted to take you through our approach to the STEP review and the changes and outputs that we've had from that. I think the STEP review and the subsequent change proposals raised are a good example of where we've been with the change process and where we could get to and how we can utilize some of this optimization a little bit more. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with the STEP review, but if you're not, a brief kind of summary. RTS undertook a review of the STEP Secure Data Exchange Portal system over the course of the last year or so, working with industry parties to understand the limitations and the challenges faced in the utilization of that system. And we garnered some really rich and useful feedback on that system, and the outputs of the review was that we had some 29 recommendations for improvements, and initially 6 CPs were raised based around sort of common sense groupings of those recommendations. During the sort of review of the sandbox and how we could look to optimize and refresh that, we've looked at those change proposals and said, well, are there bits of these changes that we could push through in a more efficient way? Is there a quicker way of doing this? Is there a more sensible way of implementing some of these improvements? And the answer was simply yes. So as you can see in the tables here, initially we raised 6 CPs, and through process of reviewing the contents of those CPs and understanding which bits we can move through quicker, we've now grouped those down to 3 CPs. And have presented some of those findings to RIG, again, utilising that kind of back and forth with industry to make sure that we get the kind of sign off and sort of sense check our approach here. And that feedback has been kind of positive, and has confirmed our thinking that this is the right way to go with it. I think one of the points I want to kind of elaborate is that certainly the real rich benefits, as I say, of the STEP review aren't lost in this approach. There's no recommendations that we aren't moving forward with. It's simply a kind of reorganization and a re-optimization of the original CP groupings into more common sense groupings, as you can see on the right hand side here. What that means is that it's going to reduce the change burden that the STEP review outcomes presented, hopefully allow those changes to be progressed in a more effective way, grouping together some of the themes that were originally set forth in the original set of CPs. And the other aspect is that there's some elements of those CPs which could be progressed through using category 3 changes. So some of the guidance documentation aspects of the changes, for example, we can progress with those improvements and changes without the need of a formal CP to be able to do those. So as I say, it trims things down, it makes things a lot more optimized and punchy. And it reduces that burden on parties to manage 6 changes down to 3. So the back and forth between ourselves and the RIG group is continuing as we work through the remainder of the CP groupings that we're proposing, and we'll be utilising that back and forth and the useful feedback that the RIG group provides to make sure that the remaining CPs, as we progress them through the change process, are kind of signed off on a regular basis with RIG. So that's an example there of how the sandbox can trim things down and optimize the change process for parties. think I'm handing back over to Elise. I could be wrong. That's Gemma. There you go.
Thanks, Ryan. Yeah, so we just wanted to show you, if you can just move on to the next slide, please, Jenny. Run through a bit of a proof of concept. So following all the feedback that we gathered, that Glenn ran through earlier in the session, which was formed from not only industry, but also from the internal change delivery teams, have identified a pretty obvious need for a new system to better facilitate the interactions between areas of the code manager and engagement between the change function and our stakeholder parties. We want to ensure that you're all on this journey with us, so we have ran some small engagement sessions to test our thinking with representatives from parties across REC to get some initial feedback. We are looking to continue to widen these engagement sessions, so if anyone wants to be involved going forward, do please let us know. You can either reach out to Glenn directly, your OAM, or through the service desk. We formed the Change Improvements Working Group, which does include representatives from change, release, committees, OEMs, technical design, performance assurance, inquiries, and RECO. So it's been a really big collaborative effort across the teams. The working group has been set up to explore stakeholder needs and feedback, but also to understand pain points that we feel across the working processes internally for the code manager as well. So lots of work have gone into developing a set of process maps and functional requirements, identifying blockers and barriers, and ultimately working together to identify ways that we can overcome and remove these, ensuring that they speak back to the documented issues that we've received from stakeholders, but also feel ourselves working and operating in the change function across the code manager. So this has resulted in a proof of concept being developed, which Matthias is going to demo for us in a moment. So it's important to remember that this isn't a final solution, but it will give a flavour of what we're looking to introduce and kind of where we're headed. So as I said earlier, we do want you to feel like you're on this journey with us and really encourage you to feed into the design as we continue to move forward. So with that said, I will hand over to Matthias.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to show you what we've been working for a couple of or few last weeks. And let me just quickly share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay, yeah, no one is shouting that not.
Yes,
that's great.
Yeah, we can.
So I will start first from proposed revised version of the change registry. So in order to showcase what we can do and how quickly certain operations within the new view is going to work, I created 200 change proposals. They are randomly generated, so don't hold me accountable for some of the things that doesn't follow all the business rules. But the ID is randomly generated, the title is randomly generated, impacted schedules are randomly selected, impacted party types are also randomly selected based on the business rules. But it might be that there are some changes that have a mixture of things that shouldn't be put together. Also, dates are randomly generated as well. So what we can see right now here is a Kanban view of all the change registry. Rather than seeing this as a long table, we have a Kanban view. That Kanban board view that is grouped and by default is grouped by stage. Quick disclaimer that stages right now are not sorted in the right order, but it's just for the sake of proof of concept to show that we are grouping by stage. And as you can see, each column right now represents stage. And we know that, for example, in definition, we have 27 change proposals, in assessment 26, in release 19, validation 36, and so on. There's more changes, and we can scroll left, right, and either we can do it with the mouse, with the touchpad. If we don't have a mouse with the horizontal scroll, we can just press Shift and use the regular scroll, Or of course, we have a normal scroll bar at the bottom that we can also move left, right. Each column is also scrollable, so we can see how many changes we have in each column. We can scroll, and also we have hover effect whenever we are trying to focus on something, that particular card sort of pop out. In the card itself, we have basic information about particular change proposal. So of course we have ID and title, we have impacted schedule, we have impacted party types, we have a date, we have priority, and we can have potentially either a proposer name or lead analyst name and so on. So here's placeholder for an avatar of the person that is connected to that change. What else is new here? So by default, we are able to group by stage, but what if we would like to group by, for example, priority? So we just click, and just like that, we have everything sorted in different way. And the same principle applies, so we can scroll left, right, up and down, and so on. We can also group change proposal by impact to the schedule. So we click, and in a second we are going to see that everything is going to be resorted. So that response is much faster than in the current system, and I wanted to showcase that right now we have over 200 change proposals in the mock system, and it works quite fast. Another option how we can group is also by party type. So we just go to group by party type, and right now everything is sorted by which party type is being affected. Potentially, if we would like to find something specific, so of course we have search. That let's try to find changes that have power in the name. So right now we have only those one with power in the name, and we remember that there was some ID with, let's say, 36 in it, but we don't remember what exactly was that. So we just need to put 36, and right now we are going to have every change that has power and 36 in the name. So it doesn't matter where that 36 is, it's going to find out any piece of text that contains 36 and contains power. And as you can see, that sorting or filtering is done on the fly. If we would like to filter things by party type, we have also options. So for example, if we are going to change back to grouping by stage, and we want to select only changes that are affecting, let's say, shippers. But rather than scrolling down and selecting that, we can just start typing here, and it's going to autocomplete that there's shippers on the list. Right now we have one filter applied on party type, but we would like to also find out the one that are also affecting DCC. So we can have shippers and DCC. So that field is multi-select. And also we can then add schedule. And I would like to find the one that are affecting main body. So I have change proposals that are affecting shippers, DCC, and they are affecting change body. And again, I can find here all the changes that have, for example, design in the name. And I have limited view. And as you can see, everything happened almost instantaneously. I can close that pop-up and I can have better view. I want to come back to the previous view. I can quickly just clear all filters. And right now I have only a search bar for design. I can clear search, and I can see again back all 200 change proposals that are currently in the system. So right now, how we took a new approach to see details for the change proposal. If we are going to click one of the change proposals, we are being redirected to dedicated page for that particular change. And one of the new things that we would like to introduce is to ability to select your interest. So if the system will detect that that particular change based on your user type in the system is affecting you, you can select your interest, and you can select that either you are impacted and you would like to know more about that, you want to just follow the updates, or you would like to engage. You can select one of those options that's going to be stored in the system, and you are going to get a dedicated notification based on your selected interest. You can just close that, and here in that new section we have, of course, title, some short description of the summary on the change. We have change progress indicator, so we see which stages or gates have been already completed, what is the current one, and what are remaining stages that needs to be completed as well. A bit of summary of the change that we can expand each different section with some updates and information that we are submitting into the system. Quick summary: who was proposer, who raised, if we have change analyst and technical analyst assigned, we are going to see here who is assigned to that, and proposal for the timeline to see how the change is progressing with more details than just, okay, the definition has been completed, but potentially here we can have definition has been completed and the date. And we know that between starting change proposal and completing change proposal gate, we have different statuses as well. So potentially between those main gates milestones, we can also display progress of those internal statuses. So you can know that, okay, in the change proposal right now, we have 2 out of 5 steps already completed. So you know that you can expect 3 more steps to be completed before we are going to put that change to vote. And if we are going to go back to change tracker or change registry, we have option to quickly raise new proposal directly from that screen. So we don't need to go back to any dashboard and looking for the option to raise the ticket. And also we are proposing to have a multi-level menu on the left-hand side, and we can go to change registry and raise a form directly from here. Form is also a bit redesigned in terms of proposal. So of course we have some of the information pre-populated based on your user account. We have form that is made out of 6 steps with 7 additional steps that is just proposal summary. So we can review what exactly has been entered to that quite long form. At this point in time, there's no validation for implemented for proof of concept, so I will just go next, and I'm not going to get any feedback that field is mandatory and I need to fill that in. I just want to show you how potentially the form could look like. Of course, we have drop downs to select things. If we are going to put proposal. And just go like this. If we have any text area, we can expand that to have more space to see what we are typing or potentially what we are pasting in. If we have multi-select options, of course we have drop down, but then we can just click and it's going to add that particular option to the list, and unclicking again, it's removing that. Of course, on the progress bar or progress list of the steps, we know that we already completed proposal details, issue summary, and right now the step that we are seeing on the right hand side is consumer impact. We are going next. Here we have another similar with similar controls option to upload files. That is currently just the placeholder, and the last step is of course proposal summary. So all the information that we submitted, we can review if we are happy with what we entered, if there's no typos, and at the end we can submit proposal. What is not implemented in the POC, but we are considering implementing that at every part of the filling in the form is being autosave as draft. So there's no need of following the whole or filling in the whole form in one go. At one day, you can come and fill in proposal details in issue summary while this is ready. Next day, you can come and fill in consumer impacts and so on. you don't have to do everything in one go. We can just come back and review each steps, change the content, and when you are ready, go to proposal review and just submit the proposal. And that would be it from that will be all what I wanted to show you right now. And I think over to Gemma, or I'm happy to pick up any questions that we have so far.
Thank you for that. I will just take the control again. And we are asking for some feedback on this demo now. So in the meantime, we'll answer some questions that have been asked in regards to this demo. So let's see. First of all, there's a question that says, change forms are a big part of the rec budget supplies pay for. No, sorry. Bear with me, I'm just looking through the questions. Let's see. Can an overall dashboard be included in the Change Hub to show changes of all changes in the pipeline?
So I can pick it up. Yes, so that's in terms of dashboards. Yes, that's something on our to-do list to come up with some mock-up and proposal. And what we are also suggesting is to have that dashboard maybe not necessarily call it personalized, but individualized based on different persona or different access to the change board or change hub. So if you are a proposer, you can see potentially all the change proposals that you have in the draft state, recently released proposals, and so on. If you are a change manager, you're also going to be presented with newly raised changes that potentially you can go and push to verification stage or approve, and so on. So we are working on something like that, and as soon as we are going to have mock-up to share, definitely we are going to arrange something.
Thank you. And there's another question that says, can I tag changes that I am interested in only so I can find them quickly?
Yes, so that's the part of that pop-up, that if you're interested in given change, you can sort of subscribe to the changes or notification about that particular change, and then on potentially on the dashboard you are going to see those as a separate list. That okay, those are the changes that you show interest in, and you can quickly access those.
Thank you. And another question is it possible to query view issues on the new portal in the same way as changes?
Whether I wanted to, I don't know whether we just needed to understand that one a little bit more,
Yeah.
Jenny. If we're talking about will an issue, as we're treating an issue in the new way, we'll be able to do exactly the same. Yes. And as I understand it, Matt, the requirement that we've got is that you'd be able to search either by, if you put in issue number or change number, we'll be using the same number and you'd be able to see that. So yeah, we'd be able to track issues exactly the same way. We're not expecting anything different.
Thank you for that, Helen. And there's another question that asks, could the change proposal documents include a date so we know which are the most recent?
So we are looking at documentation as a whole. So I know Matt's given you sort of a view of how we're going to do that. Yeah, if that's a requirement that people want, sure, we can add it in. Matt, I don't think that's going to be a no-goer, is it? But we are going to spend some further time looking at how we actually represent documentation within the hub. This is just a very initial view that we've got. So we've got lots of requirements around documentation, so we will develop them.
Thank you. And I think we'll have a look at some of the feedback now. So the first one says, I think it looks great, much better than the existing register. 2 questions. What does the stage definition refer to? And what is the difference between each of the different boxes of the pop-up? So what changes from pressing I'm interested to I want to engage?
So I can
go on, Matt. You can.
So I can pick up the question around the pop-up box. So that the intent is that you're going to get different set of notification, And if you want to engage, then the potentially code manager is going to approach you directly for more detailed feedback. If you are just interested, you're just going to get notification about changes to the proposal.
On those, at the moment, we've only got the 3 buttons there, haven't we? I think we realised that we probably will have more. The 3 just showing that the initial that you can register an interest, and that isn't final. Then, if you want to come back later and show your interest after, later down the line, you can check that button again. Sorry, Helen.
I think, no, Glenn, I was going to say as well, I think we've had another question that says, can I register that I'm really not interested in this change, full stop? So that is something that we'll pick up as well. Just on that first part of the question that we had was, what does the stage definition mean? They're referring back to those 5 initial stage gates that I talked about earlier in the process. So the verification stage, the assessment stage, definition, change, and then vote. Definition stage is really solution development, where we're doing full impact assessors and we're developing like that solution. So if you looked at Matt's list of everything that was in definition, it'd be stuff that we were actively working out what the solution was for, if you'd be able to see it in there.
And all those would be issues and not changes at that point. Don't forget, because they aren't created as CPs until you get later down the line to stage gate 4, I think it is. So if you're in stage gates 1, 2, and 3, there'll be an issue by definition, and only CPs would be in 4 and 5.
Thank you all. I think we have 2 kind of similar questions here. So can issues be viewed in the same way as changes?
They are, as you said, just said, there'll be issues in 1, 2, and 3, and changes in 4 and 5. But you can search for both, and they'll be linked in their numbering.
Thank you. And the next question is, are changes numbered consequentially? I like that consequential numbers means I know I haven't missed any.
Yeah, and as I made a disclaimer at the very beginning, the reference IDs for this POC are generated randomly, and in the prod system they are going to be based on the requirement. So the last number that's already in the system incremented by 1, and that's going to be new reference number for anything that is newly raised.
Thank you. And the next question is, will the Kanban send email alerts to you automatically if you register that you are directly impacted or interested?
In short, yes, but it's not going to be Kanban. It's going to be some backend system that will know and review if the new changes is raised and you are affected party. It's going to send notifications through the notification subsystem rather than the view itself.
Thank you. And there's a lot of positive feedback here, so thank you for that. And I think the last question is, I think it was answered during, but can we sort by most recently updated?
Yes, so on one of the requirements for POC, there was to also group by date. I didn't manage to implement that grouping, but that will be similar to sorting by the most recent update.
Thank you. And I think that's everything for now. So we can leave this poll open if you have any further feedback or any. Yes, Joy has raised her hand.
Yeah, Jenny, there was one more question about user testing.
Is that on the Q&A?
It's in the polls, so where people were invited for feedback on the demo.
It might be that it's on the very top, because right now it shows that there's 1 new response.
So if you can't find it, someone's asked, will any user testing be done with suppliers and other end users?
This is a proof of concept at this stage, just to show what we might want to do. As soon as we get to that stage of putting a real system in place, absolutely we'll be testing it with parties. Watch this space.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you, Joy, for bringing that one up. I think, when will this be in place is another question that's just come in.
And unfortunately, we can't say exactly when yet. We've still got a bit of work to do. We're hoping to look at it sometime next year. Well, yeah, we haven't got a date yet, but we'll work with industry as well for the appropriate dates to bring this in.
Thank you. I think we'll move on for now. Again, like I said, I'll keep this feedback form open, so if anything comes in, then we can touch base on that again. And now that leaves us with our Q&A. So I think we'll talk through some of these together and hand them off to the proper experts. So the first question is, would any of the stage gates result in a work group for solution development, or would this be referred to RIG?
Do I have to make that the first one, Helen? I can do if you like.
Yeah, you go, Glenn, you're on it.
So we'll be using the rig and any other work groups that are appropriate, and it may be that we set up special rigs or special work groups as well if that's seen being necessary. There's no restriction. I think we'll be open to the right solution for each change, but we're taking it to an expert group generally that's the most appropriate for that change.
Thank you. And the next question is, some changes that are implemented are raised less than 6 months' notice. What consideration will be provided if a party cannot comply with this due to notice?
I think that's already something that we currently do anyway as part of like impact assessment. So the impact assessment will give us when we think we can release stuff out and that's appropriate for parties. So I think that is just inherent into the process, that we will make sure that, you know, there is no point in us releasing a change that nobody else is going to be able to do because it's gone too quick for everybody. So that is part of the assessment and the definition stage, to make sure we understand what the constraints are and the impact that it's going to have on affected parties. So it will get picked up within that.
Thank you, Helen.
There's always a derogation process if one individual party finds themselves in a position not to be able to implement. So.
Thank you. And the next question is, change forms are a big part of the REC budget suppliers pay for. How will the cost be proportioned to non-supplier parties who arrange the change?
I think the REC lays out the way that charges are levied. Unless Reco has got a comment on whether they want to comment on this one, or Joy, sorry, rather than just Reco.
So the REC is funded by REC parties. We do have non-REC parties who use services, those that don't use services, and as you all know, anyone can actually raise a change. Going back to my initial statement, the REC is funded by, or largely funded by REC parties. REC service users do pay their way in that regard. But where changes are raised, the changes are intended to bring benefits to all of industry. And so although a non-party might be raising a change, if it's something which is, predominantly self-serving and doesn't, present benefits towards industry as a whole or consumers, then it's less likely that it would be something that we support. But I just want to reiterate that we're not, where someone raises a change, we're actually looking at the benefit of that change, which might be beyond them, and hopefully it is beyond them, and that leads into our prioritisation.
Thank you, Joy. The next question is, some changes have little time between approval and implementation. This is getting worse. We have MHHS development underway and need more time.
And we have recognised that within the change process, which I think is why we're looking at implementing in that sort of assessment stage, actually working out the burden. We're trying to reduce the burden on you by bringing in like the SME function and the issues group, so that you have the comfort that the right experts are in the room making the solution if you're not able to. But obviously the roadmap and the scanner and our roadmap for change, that forms part of the prioritisation process. So we are conscious that we don't suddenly, stick in 60 changes that are all happening in the same period. Part of our function as the code manager is to ensure that we're levelling them across at the appropriate time, and we're not overburdening the industry.
Thank you, Helen. And the next question is, what engagement interaction does REC have with other code bodies to determine whether anything that they are progressing has a REC dependency?
Already established a cross-code working group which has all the impacted codes that sit on it, and where those changes should be discussed today. We don't intend to change that in the new process. That would still be part of the assessment stage. Well, you know how we need to progress that down. So yeah, that doesn't change from what we've got today. There is a group there already.
Thank you. And the next question is, what benefits will the change process refresh deliver for suppliers? How will you show us tangible return on investment?
Obviously, we are testing that now, so we're looking at. That's the reason we've used some of the task force as at least task force sandbox to see whether actually there is an improvement in delivery time and interaction, etc. That's still early days yet, so we hope to bring some numbers around that to you when we've run through the process. So yeah, trying to measure some of that tangible benefits is always difficult, but that's what we will try and do and bring it to you in over the next few weeks and months.
What will this mean for existing changes raised before the new process was introduced in terms of both process and timescales?
Clearly, we've got two different ways that we're doing stuff at the moment. We've got your existing process, and before we are looking at review of Schedule 5 at the moment. It's on our list. We obviously have to go and revise and take Schedule 5 through a change process before any of our new improvements to the change process are made live. But you can see that what we are trying to do is, if there is option and it still fits within the current Schedule 5, that we're looking at how we can streamline some of that. And you've seen some of the examples, the case studies that we picked up earlier on with that task force work. So we will still look at if there are efficiencies that we're able to make with current changes. We will do them. We're not just going to leave them and what we're not doing is going to wait until we like big bang, here we go, new change process is live and off we go again with something different. We will have a transitional phase, and we're looking at pulling together a change improvement sort of roadmap that will show you how we're expecting to merge those changes over that period. So watch this space, because that will be coming out shortly. That's something that we're in progress with at the moment.
Thank you, Helen. And this next one, I think, is some feedback for the Change Hub. Change Hub looks great, big improvement, so thank you. Addition for the future would be a pin function, so we could pin the changes we are tracking.
Sure, we can add that to the requirements.
The next question is, if a stakeholder doesn't register interest at the verification stage, have they missed the opportunity for any further visibility of said issue?
Not at all. All they're doing, if they say they're not interested or they haven't registered anything, it means they're just not going to get a direct contact to us where we come out to them. They'll still see it all. They'll still have the transparency. At any stage they can reach out. They'll still have invites to working groups, to consultation, to everything will exist exactly the same. What we probably won't be doing now is just targeting them like one-to-one to say, do you want a particular conversation about it?
I mean, you can also change your mind, can't you, halfway through a change? So if you can go back in and click another button to become more involved as well if you want.
If the issue results from some cross-code work, which code body decides the prioritization?
When the cross-code working group meets, they choose whoever the lead code is for that change. So that code would then lead the changes to the other. To the REC if they're the ones that are the appropriate ones to do. So yeah, that would help with that. Would where the timescales would come from, and we would reflect that in our documentation. I think that answers more or less the next question as well, which is talking about if it's a change to another code. Yes, we'd have to take that into account from that cross-code working group, any consultation phase, because their phase may be longer, for example, there may be differences in the way they're consulting.
Yep. And the next question is, can you provide some examples of timelines expected? Maybe take a couple of real examples so we can see how long the process should take.
Yeah, no reason why we can't done that. We have done some of this internally in the work groups between us as the code managers. So we've looked at some of that, and we clearly have got some examples of those case studies that we've shown you, where we've looked at SDEP and R0118 and what sort of efficiencies should come from there. So yeah, no reason we can't do this. We'll go away, we'll look at it, and we'll feed back to you.
Well, part of that was we did that on the ones Elise was talking about earlier, about how efficient we could take an access run through, and without giving too much away, our initial thoughts were halving the time that takes to get through, at least. But we'll as Helen said, we'll come back with some proper stats on that when we're ready to.
Perfect. Could there be a quicker alternative to a consultation response Word document if my comment is, this change doesn't affect me, I don't care?
Yeah, because we've introduced the concept now of notification and being able to notify. This isn't in our requirements, but I don't see why it couldn't be, because we've got the notification function. So we'll definitely pick it up and add it to our requirements, I think. Good feedback.
I think this might have been covered previously, but could you tell us how long to expect an average change to take? How does it compare to the current process?
Work in progress. Yeah, we'll come to when we've got some real examples to compare.
And the next question is, it was suggested a rig that a backstop date should be introduced to ensure low priority changes are not continually being leapfrogged by high priority changes.
Yeah, we agree. And I'm sure I covered earlier that we will not have any issue published that doesn't have a change start date. And the concept of having a backstop date, I think, is sort of redundant apart from that. But it's a really interesting concept, and I don't think we'd ever thought of it in that way as backstop. So it might be something that we relook at again. But we will make sure that our process that we've developed, prioritisation shouldn't change on new changes that are coming in. We're not doing a rolling list of up, down, and if something comes in, it's higher, you move further on down. We're planning as sort of outwards so that we can see, and we're slotting in. So there'll always be a start date. I'm going to think about this backstop one. I think it's an interesting one.
Next question is, will the change in the process, i.e. moving more work to the left, have an impact on costs for other codes to support the rec code?
And this one was for me. Sorry, can you hear me all right there?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So it shouldn't have any impact to costs for other codes. So if there was a situation whereby another code would have to complete a impact assessment for, potentially this technical change interfaces with a system of another code, we would look to have that system impacted once we had if rec was the lead code in this situation, we would complete the impact assessment, complete the design, and then allow the other code and its service providers to complete that impact assessment with that completed design document. This shouldn't increase any costs. It's an activity that would be happening anyway, but we're just moving it to the left so that the quality of that impact assessment and the information that would be provisioned for that other code to complete its work is of a higher quality. So hope that answers the question.
Thank you. And the next question is, if the debate is to happen at the definition stage, and assuming some industry electronic request for views, has consideration been given to the questions asked?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question. I don't know whether we can have a little bit more detail on there, but we're not just asking for electronic request for views. We'll be asking a lot of in the definition stage. We'll be using expert groups, so it will be sort of, you'll have the ability to voice it, and it won't just be electronic. I'm not quite sure the meaning of the question. I don't know, Glenn, does it mean something different to you?
Apologies, my internet went down for a few minutes there. Apologies, I'm back. Sorry about that. I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think there may be some point where people can, have their electronic view. So when I've been on the buttons, are an example, aren't they? Where I don't want to interact, I want to. But yeah, the questions asked in the definition stage, I think we'll to get the right feedback. We'll always be working with people to make sure we've got the right questions there. So, but yeah, it's an interesting thought. But come back to us whether it was, if you'd like to, and we can have a further chat on this one.
Thank you. How many changes are currently in train? How quickly will they be delivered as a result of these changes?
I believe we have 74 changes in play at the moment that are going through. So that's removing anything that's been implemented, anything that's rejected, or anything that's withdrawn. And then clearly we're looking at some task force ones as well. So that is where we are currently. And as you know, we're picking up those and we're looking at them, and where we can make and push them through a more effective process, that's what we're doing. So I know we've just given you case studies for 118 and for the STEP work, but there is further work that we're doing on the other changes to see if there are efficiencies that we can make currently with them. So as I mentioned earlier, we were looking at that sort of transitional piece and showing you how we can do it through. We'll have some more clarity on that when we provide you with that information.
Thank you, Helen. The next question is, have you engaged with industry when gathering requirements? How can we feed in?
I think we mentioned earlier that we'd run it by a small group at the moment, just to get the initial work going. We want to expand that. If you want to become part of that group that feeds into this, please reach out, as we said, either to me direct or via the help desk. And they'll come to me. But yeah, if you want to get involved, please come and speak to us, and we'll take all feedback. All of it's great.
Thank you, Glenn. And the next question is, will a recording of this demo be made available to those who couldn't attend? I can answer that question. This entire workshop is recorded, so you will have an opportunity to look back on the rec portal on the events page by the end of the week. And the last question is, how often will you engage with us as this proceeds?
We intend to have another webinar like this. We've also got some other methods that we're going to use as well. But please tell us how you want to. How would you like us to speak to you, and how often? That's a question that we're happy to take feedback on again, because if we say we're going to do it one way, sometimes it's too much for somebody, or it's not enough for others. So we're happy to work with everybody that wants to be involved, and yeah, give us your thoughts on how often, how you'd like to as well. But we certainly intend to have some more of these type groups.
Can I just give a clarification earlier on the number of changes that are going through the process? I have been corrected. We have 74 that were going through the process. 47 of them are with the task force. So some of the workings that have already been done as the task force have reduced their number. Originally, we were looking at 52, and we've taken some of those out. So those 47 are being looked at as buckets. The rest of them are established changes that are going through the current process and will be at various different stages through there. There's nothing that is sitting waiting to be looked at. Everything is in progress and is being moved through at the moment.
It was our initial starting point, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have one more slide from Glenn regarding the next steps.
So hopefully this will pick up some of the questions we just asked as well. So if you want to go on to the next slide. Yeah, as you said at the start, there's still work to do. This is still early stages, and we want your feedback, to help us continuously improve. the service, not only the hub, but the way we deliver change to you. So please keep in touch with us. We'll also publish a plan for the question. We said 52, it's now 47 for our CPs that are within the task group. We'll publish that shortly, because we know that we are condensing some of those and making their timescales are not what you're used to. So we'll publish something that could show you how they're all progressing, the key dates when you need to interact, and points when you can, when we need you to feed in. So we don't want you to miss anything, because the fact that we're pushing these through probably more quickly than you've been used to. And as Helen said earlier, we are at the moment reviewing Schedule 5, because we think there are some consequential changes if we want to bring in this new change way of working, and we'll bring that to you to review, possibly by the RIG or by one of the working groups, and make sure that certainly everyone on this workshop today has got a visibility of it, and please push it out to anyone else that wants to see it. We also talked earlier about the role of the RIG, and we also thinking about the terms of reference and whether there's a separate group, whether we have the RIG just for issues that turn into changes, and then we just keep the operational group that we have today that's run by the OEMs and features the data cleanse activities, whether we then keep that in its entirety as it was originally thought of. So we'll come back to you on that one, but keep an eye out on whether we need two groups. The change team will also be producing a series of podcasts. I think we're going to be one will be made from this group and almost immediately, so that will be the next one out. But please watch out for the podcast that the change team in general will be running to help you through change. And we'll keep you informed of progress. Another one of the questions was how and when. This is just a new, we are new ways of working. We're just beginning to bring our ideas to you. So please feedback on how and when, and anything that you want to see it improve and how we can make it work for you. So I think that takes us on to just our last pitch, Jenny, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Thank you for that, Glenn. I just wanted to
we
ask.
got a hand up from Joy. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks. I thought that would be a good time to jump in. There was an earlier question about when the Change Hub would be introduced and what are the timescales associated with that. So unfortunately, I can't say any more than what was already said, which is we don't know yet. But what I will say is today's presentation was an opportunity to test it out with you and get your feedback. And now that the code manager has done that, we seem to have got support from this group at least. It means that we can internally within RECO consider how we support that and allocate the funds for that development. I hope you can appreciate that it's not a simple development, which is why it's the sort of thing we'd like to test out with you guys first. But we've received initial positive feedback today. We can move towards looking at the funding and get that approved. And I'm sure the code manager will continue to consult as we refine the requirements for the development. So yeah, I can't tell you a firm timescale, but today is a very useful and key step in getting us to move towards implementing it. The code manager will continue to speak to you, and it will be hopefully an improvement which does bring lots of benefits to you guys, to industry. A lot of what the code manager has already done so far is shaved bits of time savings, and also pulled in expertise from around the industry, and that's what we hope to continue doing through all of the improvements we shared today. I really didn't mean to speak so much, so I'll hand back to the code manager.
Joy.
Thank you, Joy. And just before we go, I think we just want to get some general comments, and we just wanted to know whether there would be broad support for the changes coming in. Helen, if you want to expand on that.
I think it was just a very quick question. I think we just wanted to establish whether we were moving in the right lines, whether I appreciate that this is the first time that you've seen this, but whether broadly you were supportive of where we were going within the process. And it would be good just to get a general feel for what you think of our intentions so far. You've all gone quiet. Oh, thank you.
See some thumbs ups. If you want to put anything in the chat or on feedback directly to us, more than welcome to as well.
I think somebody had raised their hand there for a moment, or was that just a reaction?
Hopefully it was a, yeah.
You can add these feedbacks and that we're asking of in our feedback form, actually, in the open text. We thank you for joining today's event, and just before everyone leaves, we ask that you complete the feedback form on Slido. Like I said, any open text feedback that you have will also be included in this. It helps us out to know what you like about these events and what we can do to improve in the future. And yeah, thank you to all the presenters and thank everyone for joining.